In an ideal world, frontline fundraisers would spend every day reviewing their caseloads, creating strategies for soliciting gifts, and cultivating relationships with their donors. But too many times, nonprofit leaders keep standing in the way of their staff and prevent that fundamental work from happening. When fundraisers get diverted by tasks outside their primary roles, there can be serious consequences: reduced productivity, unhappy donors, and decreased contributions to your organization. Today, my colleagues Karen Kendrick and Kendra Loper are joining me to discuss why nonprofit leaders need to quit micromanaging and how to create an environment that supports fundraisers in accomplishing their jobs they're inspired to do. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritus Group, featuring Richard Perry and Jeff Schreifels. Twice a month, we bring you the latest and best thinking about major gift fundraising, so you can develop authentic relationships with your major donors. Here are your hosts, Richard and Jeff.
Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Jeff Schreifels, and today I've got my colleagues Karen Kendrick and Kendra Loper joining me to discuss something that really frustrates me. Over my career, I've seen so many amazing fundraisers have a hard time creating strong relationships with donors because they're constantly getting pulled into things that are not their job. This takes their focus away, results in them having a lesser impact, and the ultimate impact is unhappy donors and lower giving to your organization. So, today we're going to talk about how we can let people do their jobs and be successful in their work so that you can see that increased revenue, higher donor retention, and improve staff retention. But before we get started on this, let me give Karen and Kendra an opportunity to introduce themselves. Karen, let's start with you.
You're going to have fun with this Karen and Kendra, I can tell.
I know. Karen and Kendra.
Great to be here. This is going to be an interesting conversation to talk about what frustrates you, Jeff. This will be engaging. It's tough for fundraisers and tough for leaders. So we're really coming with compassion for everyone and looking forward to just talking about what gets in the way. So I'm the Senior Director of Client Engagement, been with Veritus 12 years, and I love the leadership. How do I really get myself out of the way? How do I create space for success? So this will be a great conversation.
Yeah, really looking forward to it. I'm Kendra Loper. I'm the Director of Client Services at Veritus. And, before joining Veritus, I served in a few different roles in nonprofits, both frontline fundraising and also managing teams of fundraisers. So this is a topic I'm really familiar with, and also one, gosh, it's so important, right? We've got to talk about it.
Yeah. All right. So thank you both for being here. But let's start all the way at the beginning. Why does this dynamic exist in so many nonprofits where we can't allow our fundraisers to just do their job?
Wow, there's so many things to unpack there, Jeff.
Yeah.
I think just speaking to leaders to start out with, it's interesting to even back up to what do you believe about humanity and humans?
Yeah.
I mean, do you believe fundamentally because of how you grew up and your experiences, your previous bosses, do you fundamentally believe that people are going to do their best, that people are going to try to get one over on you, that people are hardworking and have great hearts, or that people are lazy and going to do the least they can? So first, just check in with yourself as leaders. What are my actual beliefs? Because our beliefs impact our behaviors, right?
Yeah.
And so that's a great thing to think about as you start. And it's from any way you believe, if I believe that everybody's going to do their best and work hard, then I've got to also be prepared for people who don't, right, as a leader. So no matter what it is, fundamentally, it's good to realize that and then realize where your blind spots might be. Mm-hmm. I think, too, just to start with the fact that leaders, you're under a lot of pressure. You're getting a lot of pressure from leaders above you to deliver. You've got a lot of plates spinning. And so it's so easy to go into fear mode and oh my gosh, what are they doing? I don't really know what's happening. What is that fundraiser doing? They seem to be just lollygagging around. I don't know what's happening. So you go into all this fear mode and then start to act out of that mode, which can be high control, micromanaging, all kinds of things. So we're going to break some of that down. So that, just think about that as we're talking. What do you believe about humans? And then what kind of pressures are you in that may make you go into a stress mode? And when you go into stress mode, what do? Do you run and hide? Do you take over? Do you micromanage? What are some thoughts you all have about all that?
Oh, that fear piece is big, right? It's depending on where you are in your leadership journey and trying to, you know, hold that position with responsibility and also recognize and be transparent about, we can't know everything, right? No leader can. And how can we really be vulnerable and allow that to be a piece that it works for us when we're working with our teams?
I mean, I just recently, this whole pressure from the top of the CEO and the board coming down on managers, and then it relaying down all the way to the fundraiser, has just happened to me with one of the clients that I've heard about, where all of a sudden, they've been working really well, doing the Veritus way thing, not focusing on all these activity-based things, KPIs. And then all of a sudden, in the last few months, there's been all this pressure from the DoD on all the fundraisers. You've got to meet your metrics. And I'm like, and then all this, and it's putting all this pressure, and everyone's like, where is this happening? So I call them up and I just say, what's going on here? What's happening with, are you getting pressure from your boss? Because all of a sudden we're acting different. And then it comes out that, yeah, the senior leadership all of a sudden thinks that we need to have all these large gifts come in. Even though they've been growing year over year over year, they're not happy that there's not $1 million gifts coming in the door right away. And so you're right, there's all this pressure coming from leadership, their leadership onto management, and then it trickles down, and it's just it's toxic for everyone. So that's just been really interesting of what's going on, and it feels like it's also connected to the economy and people feeling like we're just not getting the revenue that we budgeted for, and just leads everyone to doing bad things.
Yeah, so it's interesting. How do I, as a leader, not pass that pressure and fear on to my people? How do I pause? For example, the $1 million gifts, pause and say, hey, leadership's pointed out we haven't really had many of those. Let's talk about what it would take to have that happen down the road. Let's talk about the timing that would take. I mean, it is a great thing to point out. I mean, that's valid. I mean, there's really missing opportunities there, but that's like a 2-year process of working with folks and being really focused on that. Yeah, how to take it as a gift, but not pass the negative pieces on.
Yeah. Okay, so when a leader is operating from this place of fear or distrust, what does that end up looking like in practice, Kendra?
Oh, Jeff, I mean, you described it well in the scenario you were painting, but we see it all the time, right? With leaders. I myself made this mistake as a leader in a nonprofit, right? Really thinking through, man, I've got to put all of these activity-based metrics in place. I've got to know what my fundraiser's doing. It's like gripping that control tighter and tighter. And it really, to the fundraiser, and I've been in this seat too, it feels like a lack of trust, right? All of a sudden, like I'm having to report on a number of calls and all these things that really don't move the needle and feels very transactional. And so again, how do we pivot, right? How do we pivot to not just the number of things we're doing and how we're interacting with donors, but how meaningful are those engagements? What are we learning about the donor in that process? And it can happen naturally because leaders are wearing so many hats. Karen, you talked about this. And, sometimes we begin to pass off those things to our fundraisers who really should be focused on their caseloads and, getting to know their donors, but we begin to pass off those tasks. Can you serve on this committee? Can you help with this event? And, events are tricky too, because if you're anticipating your donors to attend, there is this, like, I want to be a part of that. I want to have some control and say in how that's going to look. And so we can take our eye off the ball real quickly onto things that matter, but that don't really move the needle in terms of the caseload work that we're really trying to focus on, especially in major gifts. So, I think, Karen, you also talked a little bit about this, but leaders can often get promoted without any training, right? Like they just get, they've been there the longest, they've been really successful in their role. They should be a great leader, right? And maybe they're a great fundraiser, but they don't have any management skills and they haven't had any time to build those skills and any opportunity to build those skills. And so we don't provide that training for them. Either we don't have it in the budget or we just don't prioritize that training. And then we end up with leaders who start trying to coach a team and they don't know how to have those difficult conversations with underperforming team members. They don't know how to even move beyond that. Feels uncomfortable, right? To have hard conversations. How do you move beyond that discomfort? They don't know how to do that. As you mentioned, Karen, they don't always know how to assume the best and really lean in and try to learn what's going on before they build this scenario of worst case scenario, right? Like, oh, well, if I had all this time on my hands, that fundraiser's probably not doing what they need to do unless I know exactly, the number of activities they are completing in each week. I begin to build this narrative. And again, what gets lost there is trust. There's no trust in the relationship internally to say, here's where we're headed, right? Here's how we do this work. What are your roadblocks? What are your challenges? How do I help you remove those so that you can do your most important, best work and get to know these donors and really partner them with the work of our organization that really makes their heart light up, right? Like that's the true honor in that. And there's so many pieces to that. As a new leader, I remember I didn't know how to prioritize and manage my own schedule with everything I had on my plate, in addition to managing a team, right? So it was like, how do I do all that? I still had a caseload of donors myself, and what does that look like? So there's just so many plates spinning, and it's hard, right? I mean, management of people are hard. We all are flawed. We all have things going on. And so how do we focus them on their most important work and really prioritize that caseload focus? We talked about this the other day in a meeting we had, but you got to have these hard conversations early and often, right? So what does it look like? What do I expect of you if I'm your leader? What does it look like at the end of this quarter? What does it look like at the end of this, 6 months or at the end of this fiscal year? Where do I hope that we'll be and what will it take to get us there? And if we don't have those conversations early and often, we wait till it gets to that frustration point, right? And we're wondering, there's a lack of information about what the fundraiser is doing. So again, we start to build that narrative around, I need to control the environment.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can really damage that relationship, sometimes beyond repair, right? You get to a point where there's such a lack of trust that, it feels like there's not a way to redeem it.
Yeah.
So
thoughts. So many thoughts coming to mind. I think a really powerful piece is what story are you making up in your head? Because if you don't really know what the fundraiser is doing as far as having clear expectations and checking in on how things are progressing and what kind of meaningful conversations are they having, what's growing, it's very easy to create a narrative that they're not doing their job.
Right.
You bet.
It's not work you see, right? It's like in the olden days when they used to all be in an office and have typewriters and you just acted like you were busy when the boss walked by.
Yeah.
So, we have a different way now in the way we work to even see what busy and doing things looks like. So I think as a manager, first checking what's my narrative and getting clear. Okay, I'm going to fear narrative, maybe true, maybe not be true, but how do I sit down with someone and approach this in a really curious, open way? And bring it to them with an opportunity for us to figure out a way forward versus me just sort of clamp down and try to make it happen through some kind of high control move. So you're going to do less in the high control mood, but also fundraisers, you need to be communicating to your managers what you're doing and how you're progressing and what's happening as well. So, there's responsibility there too, because they need to feel confident that you are really making plans, managing your work, and making that happen with donors on a regular basis.
You
I think
bet.
that's a key, because this is not just all on the manager's part and leaders, but also the fundraiser has a responsibility to be proactive and talk about what's happening in with their strategic plan. How are they doing? And being able to let leadership know, as things progress, what's going on. That gives leaders comfort that, oh, okay, I know what's happening. And what they're struggling with and what they're doing great at. Um, so yeah, there's a responsibility on both sides to make this thing work. What do you all think about how leaders should focus on to help shift that dynamic, um, so that they can create an environment where people can be successful in their work? What do they need to do? How does it work? How does it start?
I think it all starts first. Karen mentioned the mindset, right? What is your mindset? But
Yeah.
next, what's your hiring process, right? What are you looking for? Do you know what skills are most important and what type of employee would best fit your organizational structure? What should that employee know, right? Or prospective employee know about your organization and their structure and how they can be successful in your environment? Those are key pieces of information to know up front before someone ever joins your team. And then here's one that unfortunately is all too common, right? We can all think of individuals, organizations where we've been a part, where we're looking for that rock star. We want someone who is tested and knows what they're doing with major gifts to come into our organization and really bring a quick fix, right? Or maybe we're behind in our revenue for the year. We're not making the progress we want with those transformational donors, and we're really looking for someone to just come in and bring a miracle, right?
Yeah.
And that really sets that fundraiser up for failure right out of the gate, right? Because nothing happens quickly in fundraising. There are no quick fixes. Relationships, just think about the friendships and relationships that you have. You don't start that relationship by making an ask of that person, right? You get to know them. What are our common, interests, and how do we match those together? And that takes time. And organizations who are already feeling a bit of stress in terms of revenue, that can be very difficult, right? There's a lot of pressure from the board, from the, leadership. We've got to move this needle, right? Because at the end of the day, they want to see their missions be achieved, right? It's coming from a good place of like, we've got to do this great work. But, as we know, a fundraiser who comes right in the door and tries to get those gifts right out of the gate, they might get a gift or two, but they won't build those deep relationships that really lead to that long-term sustainability and support and really move to that transformational giving. So they've got to have time, right? You've got to set those clear expectations, as we talked about up front. No one likes to be surprised with, oh, I didn't know you expected that of me, right? Like, how many times has that happened to you? And you're like, oh, okay. You can't anticipate everything, right? You've got to have a little bit of flexibility, but if there's a major expectation that you didn't set from the outset, that's again, really sets everyone up for failure. We talked about time and deepening relationships with donors. Again, if you're expecting someone to come in right away and start like bringing those gifts, that feels very transactional, right? It feels like it's all about the dollars. And while that is an outcome, the true goal is to deepen the relationship with those donors, really get to know what they care passionately about, and matching that with the good work that's happening in your organization. That is where the magic happens. And so really, there's nothing that can bring that other than time and those meaningful connections.
Yeah.
It's like moving into a neighborhood, Kendra, and you go over to your new neighbor and you're like, hey, I'm going on vacation next week. Would you keep my 4 children, my 3 cats, my 2 dogs,
Right.
and water my plants and clean my house before I return? That's how we expect these fundraisers to come in and ask for these big gifts with no relationship. It's crazy.
Oh, I know, it really
That's a good
is.
analogy. But you would never do anything like that, but we do it all the time, right?
Yeah.
Karen, what do you see are some of the specific things we can do to alleviate this and allow those fundraisers to do their thing, for the managers to be able to do their thing properly, not get in the way, but also provide that clarity? What are some specific things so our listeners can hear today, know, okay, from this podcast, here's what I'm going to commit to do.
First thing that comes to mind is, as leaders, spend time building relationships with your people. And even if you've been there a while, if you haven't done that, then stop and do that now. And that might look like just take someone to lunch. Hey, I'd love to hear more about your history and your work and what you've done and what you really love and what motivates you and why you're here with this mission. And so you have to build a foundation of trust so that when you get to the bumps, they fundamentally believe you have good intentions. So that's going to be really important along the way. And then, as Kendra was saying, have a clear system and structure. So if you want to know how to do that for mid-level or major gifts, Veritus has all of that for you, laid out in our white papers and our courses and all of that. And that's being clear about how they can build a structure to be relational and how they'll be measured. And like Kendra said, what are we looking for in 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, a year?
Yeah, I mean, like from a manager perspective, if your fundraisers have a goal for their donors, have them tiered, have a plan for every donor throughout the whole year, from a management perspective, that is the baseline for you to be able to handle all of this. So you don't have to micromanage. You don't have to do all these crazy KPIs because you have this plan that they're working from and they're all agreed to do it. They're all bought into it, right? So that structure, as you said, is absolutely essential.
Yeah, we have good job descriptions where it is only focused on donors. And that's what we really want you to look at, is sit down and be clear about what your expectations for them are, and that you're going to work to protect them from the busy work of other things. However, two things need to happen. If they start being pulled in many directions, they need to come to you and say, okay, look, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and this is how much time it's taking. I only have 10 hours a month to actually work with donors. So, set the expectation that the fundraisers come to you, but there may be times as a leader as well. I tell you, as a fundraiser, it's a lot easier to run around and plan events and do other things and be on committees than to do the work of building relationships that are meaningful. So you may have to check some of your folks at times to say, okay, I want you to give me a thing of how much time you're spending a month in all these different categories, and let's realign so you can focus on donors. So it can go both ways. And then managing those above you. So if, let's say, the example of pressure for $1 million gifts, I understand you all are interested in that. That makes a lot of sense. Let me break down for you what that takes to do that. And you've met with your team and you have a plan. Okay, we have identified key people we think have potential. These are the goals and plans. Actually, I'm going to bring those names to you to see what connections and ideas you have. But this is a 2-3 year process. But we have begun it, and this is where we're headed. So if folks know what you're doing and it makes sense and it's logical, they can calm down and realize that we're still reaching our goals, we're still working our mission, and we have a plan to do some of the things that we need to do. What other thoughts come to mind for you all?
I was just going to add, I think it's important to share that with your leaders above you, but it's also important to share across the organization. I can think of a couple of examples where, as a major gift officer, I was, supposed to be at all of these internal meetings, and yet I had my responsibility to meet with donors and opportunities to meet with them. And so I was being pulled in a lot of different directions. And I finally just said to these other committees I served on, I will come when I can, but my priority is work with donors. And this is why that's important for all of us, right? This means we can sustain this work, and just having that conversation proactively help other people in the organization not feel bent out of shape if I didn't show up for a meeting, right? They would understand she's here if she can be, but if she can't, then she's out with donors, and that's good for all of us.
Exactly. It's the beautiful thing, because all three of us have seen, because we've worked with some amazing clients over the years, that we've seen this be successful. We've seen it when a manager does all the stuff that we've been talking about, and the end result of it is an amazing thing to watch. Revenue's great for the organization. The fundraisers are happy because they get to do the job they wanted to do. Managers feel good because their people are doing the good work, and they feel like they've they've got a nice engine going that's making this all happen. And it's like, if you could follow this roadmap that Karen and Kendra just kind of outlined here, we know it'll be successful because we've seen it over and over again.
Yes.
Yeah.
then what's coming to mind for me, Jeff, is so when you're frustrated, when
Yeah.
you feel that frustration, when you feel that pressure, look at it as information versus a bad thing. It's just information that
Yes.
something is not matching up. And then be curious about, okay, where's that coming from? What's its purpose? What do I have to learn from it? How can I be curious and then utilize that in my leadership in a way that builds trust and builds capacity and possibility?
That's good. I love
Easier
that.
said than done.
But it's good, right? Just to think about that as information. And that's a nugget I'm going to take with me today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me, and we hope this has inspired you, our listeners, to get yourself out of the way and allow your team to be successful in their work. And if you'd like to hear more about how we support organizations in doing this through a comprehensive consulting approach, we'd love for you to connect with us. You can follow the links in the show notes or on our website to connect with my colleague Amy and learn more about our services. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritus Group. Richard and Jeff also write an ongoing blog that you can subscribe to for free at veritusgroup.com. Please join us again next time.